Thank you for joining in on today's discussion. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Timila Ebiede. I'm the Business Development Executive of and Abbey Publishing here in Abuja, Nigeria. Today we're having a discussion on the book titled Insecurity. 6 speakers will be giving us a report on emerging threats in the 6 Niger Delta states: Akwa, Ibom, Delta, Cross River, Bayelsa, Rivers, Edo, and Rivers. Akwa, Ibom, Bayelsa, Cross River, Delta, Edo, and Rivers states. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the day, Dr. Judith Asuni. She's the editor of the titles that we'll be discussing today. She founded the Academic Associates Peace Work, the first Nigerian NGO working in conflict management. She's the co-facilitator of the Niger Delta Dialogue, founded in 2016 as a safe space for discussion and analysis of issues concerning insecurity in the Niger Delta. So without any further ado, Dr. Judith Asuni, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here.
Good morning.
This webinar is being organized by our publishers, Jonas and Abby, who are the publishers of this book, which I hope all of you will have access to. It's a 400-some page something on insecurity in the Niger Delta. Let me give you a little bit of background as to how this book came about. I've been working in the field of conflict management since 1992, when it was a new field everywhere in the world. And in 2016, Toko says the audio is not coming in at his end.
Yeah, I just saw the message.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
In 2016, when the Niger Delta Avengers were attacking oil facility infrastructure in the Niger Delta, no one was responding. So we did a one-of Niger Delta dialogue in June of 2016. At that time, it was decided that we should continue the dialogue because it was important not only to achieve a ceasefire with the militants in that year, but also to continue to discuss the issues of the region. So we've had a series of dialogues over the last almost 5 years now. The one in September of 2019 was with all of the senior police officers in the entire Niger Delta region. We had the 2 ARGs, we had the 6 CPs from the 6 states and other people. And at that stage, it was commented that we really don't have up-to-date information as to what's happening in the Niger Delta. And we must know what's happening on the ground in order to be able to take care of it. So the beginning of 2020, we commissioned a 6-state study on insecurity in the South-South. All of these activities, by the way, are funded by the European Union. We identified teams of 2 people for each of the 6 states, trained them. They went out to do the field work in April, May, June. The preliminary reports were presented in town hall meetings in July, August, September. Amendments to the reports were made at that basis. And from there, we went on to publish. And the final result is a 6-state studies in this book. At the time of the town hall meetings, we also identified policy advocacy committees that were set up in the 6 states, and they've helped to take the information about the insecurity issues out to their states. We've also done a 7-part series on AIT television, discussing each state study. And then there's also a summary episode that was never publicized, but it's on our website. All of these things are available on the aapw.org website. So we encourage you to have a look at them and read more. We have given copies of this book to all of the security agencies, the international donors, the members of the House of national legislature. We've given them to the governors, to the members of state executives, to civil society, religious leaders, and particularly to members of armed groups that that may be involved in provoking insecurity matters. So our meeting today will consist of the 6 researchers, 1 person of each of the 2-person teams, who give a very brief summary of the findings of each state. But before we do that, Dr. Tarila Ebiede will give an overview of the project. Tarila, Professor Celestine Bassi, and I were the editors of the volume. In addition to that, Professor Oshita and Ms. Eneba Bamanwa were peer reviewers, and my co-facilitator of the Niger Delta Dialogue, Ambassador Nkoyo Toyo, was also very key in conducting this research. So you can see that this book came out of massive study in the Niger Delta. Nobody sat down at a desk and just decided to invent this. Instead, we involved people from all across the Niger Delta in producing what we think is a definitive and granular composition of works on insecurity in the South-South, or the Niger Delta, as we call it. So at this stage, I will hand over to Tarila, who is he's attached to the Brussels School of Governance in Belgium, in the Netherlands, but comes very frequently to Nigeria, and he is from Bayelsa State. So Tarila, over to you, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to join you today to discuss the title, Insecurity in the Niger Delta, Emerging Issues in Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, Cross River, Delta, Edo, and River State. The issues have already been, the background have already been laid by Dr. Asuni, and I will go further to provide snippets of what we should expect from the researchers. In my commentary and discussion, I will reflect on the issues of insecurity at a larger broad scale in the Niger Delta. But as a background, most people here in this forum, in this meeting, are people living in the Niger Delta in different states, communities, towns, and villages in the Niger Delta. And everyday issues of insecurity are experienced by people in this forum, from kidnapping to herdsmen, Fulani herdsmen, and conflict with the local communities, to issues involving gender violence, community conflicts, and other issues. These are issues that are experienced by people here in this group. And this research was designed as a way of providing detailed information to put a science behind some of the issues that makes it on the news every day. There are detailed information, for example, issues such as piracy in the Delta, in the Niger Delta. When you look at the state reports, you will see how these issues occur at a different scale. So let me just briefly provide a background, as already said, and I will, before I yield the floor to the states, the authors of each of the states. As a background, it's important to understand insecurity in Nigeria, that insecurity is an urgent problem in Nigeria at a national level, from the northeast to the northwest, to the middle belt, to southeast, southwest, and the south-south. We are all experiencing a problem of insecurity. Although when you look at the news, people emphasize on issues of insecurity related to kidnapping or Fulani, the banditry involving Fulani herdsmen, or Boko Haram and other forms of conflicts in the north. there is a problem of insecurity in the Niger Delta that goes beyond key issues such as kidnapping or militancy. And it is important that people reflect on these issues. Many policymakers or even development actors often think about insecurity in line with the Niger Delta militancy that was that's led to the proclamation of the amnesty in 2009. Even though indeed the amnesties led to the reduction of hostilities that specifically targets oil companies, it did not address other forms of insecurity that is affecting ordinary people in the Niger Delta, even in the communities where oil is exploited. And the Niger Delta is an important region in Nigeria, not just because of oil, but essentially because of the people living in the Niger Delta, the people who are from that area. They are important numbers. They provide a balance between the geopolitical competition between the North and the South. They are on the Gulf of Guinea. Beyond oil, the longest stretch of ports of the sea line in Nigeria. This is an important location. Therefore, in thinking about the insecurity, we should not just think about oil alone. And we must go beyond issues of oil to examine critically the position, the place of the people of the Niger Delta in Nigeria. These people, this is beyond oil, and it's important to keep this in mind, that these people are Nigerian citizens, and their contribution to Nigeria goes beyond oil by virtue of their existence, by the virtue of their humanity, and by virtue of the role they play in the composition of Nigeria. They are important actors that must be taken into account, and whose security must be guaranteed by the state that claims monopoly over violence. So therefore, in our analysis, we move beyond the issues of amnesty and oil vandalism or oil militancy, and look at more critical issues in the community, or critical issues in the community. In doing this, we identified emerging threats of insecurity or ongoing forms of insecurity, what is driving these issues, and how it affects the lives of everyone in the Niger Delta. I will allow the authors to go into the detail for each of their case study, something that is specific, something that is interesting for each of their case study. But for now, I will provide an overarching framework of the findings. One of the major findings is that the Nigerian government seems not to have any coherent strategy to address the complex multidimensional issues of insecurity that has permeated the Niger Delta. We say so because in all of the issues identified across the different case studies you will see incoherent response by the Nigerian Security Agency, from military, from kidnapping to communal violence, to cultism, to criminal governance, to corruption, and other drivers of insecurity. There is no coherent strategy. Sometimes we see in our findings that different Nigerian agencies are at conflict in their response to specific forms of insecurity. This is an important, because without a coherent strategy from the Nigerian government, there is nothing. There is little change that we can see. So I will just immediately say that we recommended that to address this, therefore, the Nigerian government needs to decentralize its security structures, which we'll go over in our discussions later. Having said that, I want to say that in all the different forms of conflict, or different forms of insecurity in Nigeria, in the Niger Delta, we find that they are interlinked. So when the authors are talking about Akwa, Ibom, Bayelsa, Cross River, Edo, Delta, they may not speak to each other, but one thing we should keep in mind is that these different forms of conflicts are interlinked. This is one of the findings that we see, that how cultism is linked to piracy, and how cultism is linked to Yahoo or internet fraud, as they call it. and how communal conflicts are linked to land struggles, and also that the different forms of insecurity intersects one way. So one insecurity feeds into another insecurity, but also not just that, that insecurity in one state affects insecurity, forest insecurity in another state. And you see this in the riverine area of Bayelsa and Delta state. So that the issues intersect, but also the states, the locations feed into one another. That is also why we cannot talk about insecurity in the Niger Delta in isolation, in one community in isolation. We must reflect on how they connect. And this is what we see when we take a bird's eye view, when we look from above, or the issues, when we look at the issues from above. Again, one of the key issues that we see in all of the states is that of election violence. It's that indeed election violence is something that occurs across all 6 states in the Niger Delta, and this feeds into different forms of insecurity in the state. In conclusion, our study found that insecurity is affecting the quality of life of people in the Niger Delta. It's an urgent problem, urgent in the sense that without addressing this insecurity, people will not be able to actualize their human potential in the Niger Delta. Investments will not grow. We will not see significant boom away from the oil sector in the Niger Delta. People will die, and this is a very serious issue. That for the loss of one human life, a community lose the potential of greatness which is bestowed on that individual, and communities will not be able to collectively will not experience social cohesion if this insecurity persists. Young people who are capable will continue to leave the Niger Delta in search for a more safer place, as such affecting the progress of the communities in the Niger Delta. I would now yield the floor to each of the panelists to discuss their case studies. I will leave the introduction to Dr. Judith Asuni. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Tarila. Okay, let's move straight. We're going to start in the east with Cross River State, and Dr. Obi Ndifon Neji of Political Science of the University of Calabar is going to summarize the Cross River State report. He conducted the research along with Ken Henshaw, a well-known social society activist. Ndifon, over to you.
Well done. Thank you, everyone, and good morning. Thank you, Dr. Asuni, for laying the requisite foundation for this discussion. To start with, we need to know certain fundamental things about Cross River State. One, that is a border community, and it has international borders, shared international borders with the Republic of Cameroon. And that simply suggests that the conflict and the level of insecurity in Cross River State definitely has some international dimension. The study in the state basically uncovered certain conflict elements, one of which is the domino effect of the conflict in southern Cameroon, the Ambazona crisis. Ensure the influx of refugees from Cameroon to central Cross River and northern Cross River. And what we have there predominantly as identified by the study is the issue of refugee influx to the state, which has also occasioned host community refugee conflict. And it was also uncovered that because of this, we have cross-border attacks by the Cameroonian gendarmes in communities, especially like Boki local government. You found some elements of such attack in Boki local government, where gendarmes invade, cross international borders, invade Nigerian territories, and attack local communities, kidnap some persons, and we don't know what their current status has been. And the Nigerian government seems to be very silent about this. I think this is a very important finding, the international dimension of the conflict and upsurge of influx of IDPs in Cross River State. The study also uncovered basically the issue of street children, which in the North we are very familiar with the issue of the Alamajiri phenomenon. But in the state, in Cross River State, the study uncovered a different dimension of it, what they call the Skolombo and Lacasera babes. Skolombo perhaps is basically a corrupt word for street children. The origin cannot be immediately identified or traced. But fundamentally, these street children who stay on the streets, beg monies on the street, beg arms on the street, have become a timing bomb. Become a time bomb. And because of that, most of the conflict that has been reported in the state as found out from the study were basically generated and sustained or enabled by these street children. So most of the attacks, they were sent as spies to go and spies in community, and they're also used as recruits by cultists and politicians. Now, it is actually a gendered approach to the phenomenon of street children, where you have, in addition to the Skolombo, which are basically the young men from the ages of 16 to 21, you also have what we discovered to be Lacasera babes. Lacasera babes are basically the female version of the street children. So they are also used basically as spies by cult leaders and the political class. They snatch wallets from people, and because they are females or ladies, basically they disguise themselves as innocent young children who seek harm, and they commit some level of atrocities. So in addition to this, I think Dr. Taylor made mention of cultism, which is central. And cultism has been seen basically as a major defining and melting point, an enabler of conflict in the state. So most of the crimes that are committed, the issue of intercommunal conflict, intracommunal conflict, which is very common, especially in Cross River Central, is actually enabled by cult groups. The study also uncovered the issue of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And we're also aware that Cross River State was before now the host of the territory called Bakassi, which up till now we have a local government by that name in principle. But in practice, these people have been seen as stateless people, without a state and without obviously a defined territory outside what we have, what is left for them as members or people of Cross River State. And because of this, the so-called disarmed militants from that region have not fully been integrated into the presidential amnesty program. We are also aware, as found out from the study, that some arms were actually mobbed from them. And because they were not fully integrated, some of them have gone back to the creeks. So our international coastal lines, the Bakassi High Sea leading to Cameroon and the Gulf of Guinea, has not been saved as a result of the activities of these repentant militants who feel completely neglected, who feel deprived, that their colleagues, especially in Bayelsa, Rivers, and Delta, have been integrated into the mainstream of the presidential amnesty program, and they are left unattended to. So gradually, they are going back to the creeks, and that is why Bakassi again is not safe. So this is in addition to the statelessness of the people of Bakassi, in addition to the displacement of the people of Bakassi, and this has actually interacted with other conflict elements within the context to predispose the region to a fertile ground for the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. To this, the governor actually made a statement sometime in 2018 that Cross River State has become a transit point and a melting point for arms coming from Cameroon, the conflict in the Basonia, southern Cameroon, coming to Cross River State, to Ibom, Boki, and Ogoja, as the case may be, and the activities of the Bakassi strike force, who still have arms, within their reach. So in addition to this, we have issues of armed robbery, which I want to believe is general. We have issues of kidnapping. Then we have a novel issue of herdsmen attack. Cross River State hitherto has been very free from herdsmen incursion. But during the research, we were able to find out that some group of young men in trucks were able to visit the state, and we had attacks in Cross River South, in Odukpani precisely, and some part of Ogoja in Cross River North. So drug abuse has been a major driver of all of the conflict elements, leading to a sustained level of insecurity. So some of these were the findings in terms of issues driving insecurity. And the actors, as identified by the study, of course, must cut across a lot of people, the traditional institutions, the political class, the security agencies, the cohorts themselves, and the Cameroonian security forces called the gendarmes. Civil society organizations all interact in a complex way to predispose the context to insecurity. So these actors have been identified, and their strengths were also identified and documented in the study.
Thank you, Ndifon. Unfortunately, your 5 minutes is up. But
thank you.
I chose to start with Cross River because when people think about the Niger Delta, they often think about militancy. They think about the issues of rivers, Bayelsa, and Delta. But Cross River has its own unique problems. And for me, it was a shock to see how many causes of insecurity there are in Cross River. We always think of Cross River as being a nice, quiet place, but unfortunately, it's not the same anymore. Thank you very much, Ndifon.
Thank you.
Let's move on to Akwa Ibom State. Dr. Felix Oyosoro of the International Relations Department at Obong University in Akwa Ibom is going to present the state report. And his partner in the research was Dr. Nelson Okene of the University of Port Harcourt. Could we have Felix, please? Thank you. Felix, we can't hear you. Felix, please unmute.
Dr. Asuni, I think his network because his mic is unmuted.
So what can we do to get Felix?
Felix, can you use the speaker of your, remove the headphone from your phone and use the speaker directly? Dr. Chief, can we move to maybe another person while Felix sort out his mic issues?
We can. Jackson said his video is not activated.
It's now activated. Jackson, why are you moving up and down?
I've fixed that. It's activated.
Okay, let's move on. We'll come back to you, Felix. Let's move on to River State. And the person presenting this is going to be Dr. Jackson Jack of the Sociology Department at Otweke, Federal University, Otweke in Bayelsa State, but he's actually an indigent of River State. The other researchers on this project were, I always mess up this name, Dr. Kiele Oyaya and Dr. Saveri Joab Peterside. So we'll move on to Jackson, if you have your video on.
Okay, Dr. Judy, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. For River State, we had an interesting findings coming out from River State. Just like the issues we have in other neighboring states, we have predominantly the issues of cultism. River State being a coastal state, sea piracy was also a major issue. And also, we are recently experiencing a new trend of militancy alongside sea piracy and attacks on not just commercial passenger boats, but also on oil installations too. The most significant issues in river states for us is the issue of state failure, failure of governance in not just providing basic needs of the people on the development issues and all that, but also the failure of the state for protecting life and property of citizens. So in response to this, we've experienced the rise of non-state actors in river states in form of vigilante groups. So in river states today, we have what we call the OSPAC, Onega Security and Peace Advocacy Advisory Council, rather. And it started in Onelga, and today we have OSPAC across several local government areas in river states. And now the issue is that the rise of non-state actors, armed non-state actors in form of vigilante groups like OSPAC, further threatens security and peace in the state, because we've come to discover that the members of these groups are not well screened, they're not well trained to handle arms. And also the recruitment process too is faulty. So we now find out a situation whereby we have former so-called repentant cult members from either the Iceland or the Ibom or the Greenland groups, all being infiltrating themselves into the OSPAC. So the OSPAC is now gradually becoming a tool for these cult gangs to also witch hunt themselves and go against the rival cult gangs. So in recent times, we've had cases of OSPAC members being killed by rival cult gangs and vice versa. We had issues in Imoha local government, for instance, where the local government chairman has disbanded the OSPAC, and the OSPAC has also been known to participate and get involved in extrajudicial killings and human rights abuse. So aside that, River State also of recent, in fact, this new trend came after we finished the study. We discovered that being a neighboring state to Imo State and Abia State, during the NSAS protests, we had a series of crises in the southeast, most especially from the Biafra secessionist groups, the IPOB, and there were lots of attacks on police stations in Imo, in Abia, and also in River State, in Oyigbo local government in River State, which is the border local government to Abia State. So soldiers were killed in Oyigbo, policemen were also killed, and police stations were burnt. And the River State government, from its finding, and the police also from its finding, discovered that the IPOB were responsible for that. So we now see a situation whereby the insecurity challenges affecting the southeast is also infiltrating into River State. And that is largely because over time, we have a huge population of Igbos in River State who also, some of them are also, they have the soft spot for the Biafra struggle. So over 6-7 months now, Oyigbo local government has been under curfew, so that's also a flashpoint that we should also look at. And just last week, we learned that the River State governor has banned any meetings amongst the so-called IPOB guys and other Igbo groups in Oyigbo. So it's significantly taking an ethnic dimension, as if it's like Rivers versus Igbo people. So we really need to look into that before it gets out of hands. Then also,
Jackson, hold on. I think that's an important point. This is something
Okay.
unique to River State, the whole proximity to Imo and Abia. And as you said, the host pack structures that have been set up to deal with security matters. Let's leave that now and go back to other people because we've given you your 5 minutes. But those are important, unique points for your state. Is Felix available now? Do you have audio? Can we go back east a bit? Felix, are you here?
I don't think he's part of us right now.
Okay, let's move on then to Topo. Dr. Topo Coronation is of the Political Science Department at Federal University Otueke. He was one of the researchers on the Bayelsa State Report, as was Jackson, whose face you still see. So it was Topo and Jackson together. Is Topo here to give us the Bayelsa summary? Thank you, Jackson.
Good morning. Good morning, all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good morning. The issues in Bayelsa State are not very different from what we have in River State, in Delta State, and other states in the Niger Delta. Basically, the most prevalent insecurity issue we found in Bayelsa State was the issue of cultism. You know, we were more focused on current and emerging insecurity issues. If you want to talk about current and emerging insecurity issues, we're looking more at those insecurity issues that characterized the region, especially in Bayelsa State, post-amnesty. However, you want to look at cultism. Cultism predates amnesty. It has always been there, first as university confraternities and spilled over to the streets. But also we found that there are new and current dynamics of cultism where street cults have taken over. The university cults have largely reduced in their velocity of attacks and frequency of attacks. The street cults like the Greenlanders, the Icelanders, the Bobos, and all of that are very prevalent in our communities, especially in the metropolitan area in Yenagoa. And the other dimension we found about cultism is that currently even children as young as 12 and 14 are being recruited into various cult confraternities. And those younger ones are more deadly than the older ones because they want to show that they can be brutal and so they could get promoted in their ranks. So cultism is one very prevalent issue in Bayelsa State. It has permeated even primary schools. Secondary schools, primary schools all have cult groups that have infiltrated those areas, and communities have also experienced cultism. Now, so many of the insecurity issues we found here in Bayelsa State are fatigues and vestiges of militancy. For instance, we have the issue of kidnapping, which is a vestige or a fatigue of militancy. We have the issue of sea piracy. We also have drug abuse. We have issues of electoral violence, especially in Nimbe local government area, in Southern Niger local government area, and partly in Brass local government area. We have issues of theft, armed robbery, intra and intercommunal disputes, chieftaincy disputes. All of these things are found to be prevalent in Bayelsa State. Then we found one thing that we could learn from, and others could also learn from. The issue of artisanal refining and crude oil theft has reduced to the barest minimum in local government areas like Southern Niger, in Ekeremo, in Brass. And that is because our findings, they said that the interviews, we discovered that the activities of local surveillance contractors have largely reduced those activities in the state. For instance, the Dallon Oil and Gas, which has recruited a good number of those that were involved in crude oil theft and artisanal refining into the surveillance contracting job. And therefore, the youths are now engaged through that means. They are earning something. And so they have largely reduced those activities in Southern Niger, in Ekeremo and Brass local government areas. However, artisanal refining and crude oil theft is still prevalent in Ogbaya local government area. We also found that Ogbaya local government area is a hub, is a hotspot for cultism and drug abuse. Drugs are being peddled around the state from Ogbaya local government area and all of that. And one thing we have discovered is that the kidnapping that used to be very frequent in Bayelsa State has reduced. We had the privilege of addressing the governor on the findings of our study, and proactive steps were taken to do some of the things that we recommended. For instance, blocking the Ekebri Creek, which was a safe route for the kidnappers to move to Yanagwa local government, to Ekeremo, to Sabama local government, and Pokuma local government to kidnap their victims and take them to their camps and creeks in Southern Niger local government area. That creek has been blocked. And so the frequency of attacks and frequency of kidnapping issues have also largely reduced as a result of that proactive step of the governor. The governor also promised to form a body to fight drug abuse and all of that. We are waiting for that to happen as well. And another issue we found is that one of the reasons why these things are prevalent is because of political patronage. Politicians patronize cultists and those that are involved in gun running to be able to use them during elections. And those things have predisposed youths to want to go into the life of crime and criminality, since they are rewarded either by way of appointments or by way of giving them contracts or government protection and all of that. So those things have motivated the youths to want to go into the life of crime, because that is the only way they could get recognized and be rewarded. And also we found a situation where...
Toko, sorry, we have to stop here. But I think you've made several very important points. I'm glad that you talked about cultism, because it certainly is a problem all the way across the Niger Delta, and unfortunately, increasingly across Nigeria. The idea of the governor helping to block the area for kidnapping really shows the effectiveness of the study. We did the study for people to learn the facts and to take action, not for it to sit on somebody's shelf. So we're delighted that the Bayelsa State Governor is actually applying some of the information which we found. So thank you very much, Toko.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's move on at this stage then to Ebi. Dr. Ebi Sayafa is a lecturer at Bayes University in Abuja, but she's maternally from Delta State, paternally from Bayelsa State. Her partner in this project was Professor Sam Ogege from Delta State University, Abraka. So we'll turn over now to Ebi. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies.
Ebi, you have muted yourself. Ebi, you have muted yourself.
Yeah, I just undid that now, sorry. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll be focusing on Delta States. When we went into Delta States, we discovered different dimensions of insecurity, violence, and conflict in the states. And in as much as we found that the existing forms of conflict was in the state, we also discovered some emerging forms as well, which we grouped into 5 categories. So the first category is the political violence. What was really key regarding the forms of political violence was alliances between complicit political leaders, government officials, and interest groups. And this form of violence tends to occur during times of elections, whereby elections are not safe, so to speak. The second dimension we discovered was ethnic and interest group violence. As already mentioned in our conversation, militancy was one of them, although it has actually decreased. But what was quite key was the issue of militant herders and farmers clash, largely reflected in Delta North. We also had the issues of oil producing companies versus host communities clash as a result of issues of violation of MOUs or issues as a result of environmental degradation. The third category of insecurity in Delta State was organized crime. Now, we've always had issues of crude oil bunkering, but one of the will I say one of the emerging forms of organized crime had to do with issues of illegal sale of small arms and light weapons, but more importantly, this growth or development of violent gangs, but mainly not just reflected in the urban cities or urban towns, but also in the rural areas as well, especially in Delta South senatorial districts. And then the third category that we discovered had to do with social violence. I will not dwell on cultism as my colleagues have already talked about it already, but there was also the case of low tolerance of Fulani migration. And this actually as a result of the issue of the militant headers clash. So we had this very overt tension between residents and native of Delta states and people of Fulani origin, or even just from the north. And just a quick flashpoint again to ethnic and interest group violence. I almost forget to mention this fact, in as much as the issue between Insecurity, Ijo and Urubu has largely ended for several years now, but we're beginning to have, we still have this issue of this Ogbijo and Alaja communities going on. Once in a while, there's a ceasefire, later on, tensions arise again. So that is still very much there, but it's something to watch out for. But I think the real key issue for ethnic violence we need to watch out for has to do with the militant headers and farmers. I mean, in terms of Fulani, people of Fulani origin, because of the issues of the clash. Then the last form of violence, which is quite interesting, was structural violence. I say this is interesting because it has been ongoing for a very long time. But when we had issues of militancy that felt a bit more flamboyant in terms of its armed activities, the issue of structural violence was relegated to the back burner. But when we're talking with our respondent, they all highlighted these key issues. 3 of them actually had to do with abuse of civilians by security officials. The Kingdom of Baramatu is a very good example of that. We had a lot of military presence there, but more importantly, during the pandemic, we all saw the headlines, in a bid to ensure that people adhere to the curfew restrictions, so to speak. We had the security officials using more harsh ways to curb that. Another issue of structural violence is state capture and corruption. I don't need to speak too much about this because we all live in Nigeria. We're all members of Niger Delta region, so to speak. So we're very much aware of the issue of state capture and corruption, so to speak. And then the last part has to do with absence of government presence in communities. So a lot of our respondents complain about the fact that they don't see their senators, they don't see their local government chairmen, they don't have police stations, they don't have access to primary health care. These are all the examples of structural violence, a form of violence that has actually driven more armed conflicts in the states. So I think my time is up, so I will just stop at this point, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ebi. And thank you for raising a couple of issues that have not been raised so far. I live in Delta State, so I know the issue between the Northerners, that if they are Fulani, they certainly are not herdsmen, because we see people who are driving Okadas, repairing shoes. We understand in River State that we now have young Fulanis who are fishermen and even picking periwinkle in the creeks around Calabar. It's an increasing problem, and there has indeed been violence between the different ethnic groups in Delta State. So thank you very much for raising that. Also, thank you for raising the issue about the pandemic, because the pandemic has impacted us in so many negative ways that we are not always aware of. But we think about violence against citizens, domestic violence, all sorts of things. So thank you for that, Ebi. Now, we'll move on to Edo State and plan to come back to Akwa Ibom. Edo State, Dr. Iro Agedo of the Political Science Department of the University of Benin is going to present the Edo report. He conducted this along with Orare Suma. Iro reported that he was having problems with the video. Are you here with us, Iro?
Good morning, everyone.
You were there? Okay, good. Please
Yes, ma'am.
continue without the video. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everybody. I want to talk about the Edo report. We discovered a lot of sources of insecurity in Edo, but I cannot, because of the short time that I have, I can't talk about all of them, but let me single some out. Yes, but you might have muted the part. I want to talk about some of them. Can you hear me now? Okay. Principal among the sources of insecurity is courtesan. A lot of presenters here today have spoken about courtesan, but there is something unique about courtesan in Edo. Actually, one of the oldest court groups in Nigeria, the Black House actually started in Edo in the early 70s. We also discovered how deadly and how serious the problem of courtesan is, because during the NSAS movement, it took a different dimension in Edo, where coroner centers, jails were broken, and those in detention were released forcefully by the protesters. So courtesan has become very, very endemic in Edo, and there are a number of flashpoints that were identified in our report. There are some areas in Edo where people do not even go out once it's 7 o'clock in the evening because of the activities of court groups. In addition to that, to court group, human trafficking was also reported as a major source of violence in Edo State. At the time, this phenomenon was so endemic that even children used to sing capital of, when they mention capital of state, they say Edo, Italy, to tell you how endemic the phenomenon of human trafficking was at the time. But thank God, in recent years, this is going down because of some policies that the government of Obaseki has put in place. In addition to that, another source of insecurity that we discovered is kidnapping. Kidnapping is very, very rampant in Edo State. A number of prominent people, politicians included, have been kidnapped. DJs and businessmen and women, a number of them have been kidnapped. But many of them are always released after the payment of huge ransoms. Then in addition to that is the issue of political violence. We know how dynamic the politics of Edo has been in recent years, especially since last year, because of the face-off between some key political figures, Obaseki on one side and his former godfather Oshomole on the other side. The face-off between these political actors impacted negatively on the political atmosphere of the state, and a number of people were killed, some others were injured, and though it has, with the defection of Obaseki to the PDP, it reduced the violence a little bit, especially following the fact that he won the election last year. Then in addition to that is the issue of armed robbery. This has been systemic in Edo for a number of years, since the 80s. One would have thought that by now this crime would have gone down, but it hasn't. You know, all of us can remember the saga, the Anini saga of the 80s, 1986 especially. But up till now, the phenomenon of armed robbery is still very much with us. We also made...
Hero, I think I have to stop you here because Felix is back on. But I think you've raised some important points. When I read the Edo State report, I was fascinated. For example, the stories about cultists going from Edo State to Italy to control the human trafficking trade through Libya. I mean, that is shocking to me. As we've seen the whole rise of cultism in the last few months, it's been very strong in Edo State. And then, of course, the involvement of political actors. These are all things that I think are common across the Niger Delta, but particularly strong in Edo State. So we thank you for your presentation, Iro.
Thank you.
And now let's move back to Dr. Felix Oyosoro from Akwa Ibom, who I believe is now on with his phone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning once again. I hope you can all hear me clearly now. Okay, so I'm here to present the report on insecurity in Akwa Ibom State. And the issues of insecurity in Akwa Ibom State are sea piracy, cultism, communal and interstate conflicts and disputes, protests, armed violence and drug abuse, and then child trafficking. Sea piracy basically involves those local government areas and those zones who share boundaries with the waterlands and seas. So there are huge numbers of sea piracy, and these sea pirates come from both within the state and from neighboring states. And it has become so problematic that most times the women cannot go to the market because they have to cross over the river to the other side to have their produce get to the market, but they can't because of the issues of sea piracy. In Oron local government, when we visited Oron local government, we were told that there were sea pirate attacks almost every 2 days in a week. And in Ikorabasi, the paramount ruler told us that every market day, there were activities of sea piracy. And the Navy, the Marine Police, and the Navy and the military or the police are also doing their best to curb out this situation, but then they can't do more than the equipment they have. The next one is cultism. Cultism is general in all the states, but in Akwa Ibom State, the peculiarity of cultism is that cultism has become endemic in secondary schools. We had cases of cultism in secondary schools where secondary school pupils attack their teachers, form gangs and rebel against school authorities, close down an entire community where their school is located. And we raised that report, that problem in our report. And I was happy to see that in the latest state government recruitment of teachers into secondary school, they noted clearly that one of the prerequisites of applying is you must not be a cultist. So our report has taken a good undertone, a dimension in the state. So because this when we try to see the origins of cultism in secondary school, we also heard that those sent to the school for NYSC, when they come in, they belong to cult groups in their universities, and they come in and install those cult groups in the secondary schools. The next problem is the communal and interstate disputes. The most glaring communal and interstate disputes which we encountered in Akwa Ibom State was in the Nkari community. The Nkari community has been in communal disputes with their neighbors for close to 2 decades now. The problem is the Nkari Dam project. The federal government wants to install a dam project there, and the 2 villages are really fighting amongst themselves as to who is to be the host community of the Nkari Dam project. So we can see a case of federal government presence being a source of conflict in a particular community. The next one is protests. There have been issues of protests in Akwa Ibom State, especially due to the marginalization of the 3rd ethnic group in Akwa Ibom State, the Oro ethnic group, and youths came out to protest. And I think the Oro nation, the entire Oro ethnic group was mapped out as not being an oil producing area by the government. But I think today the government is taking steps back to try to correct those anomalies. Then we have armed violence and drug abuse, which is widespread out in all the local government reports. Drug abuse is also an issue in the secondary schools, because when these children are involved into cult activities, they get themselves drug addicted, and some of them drop out of schools and all that. Then another major peculiar issue in Akwa Ibom State is child trafficking. This is where women are involved in unrest and insecurity in the state. Child trafficking is very, very common in local government areas bordering the internal boundaries of Akwa Ibom State, Calabar and Abia, and Calabar, Akwa Ibom and Port Harcourt. So the police have made several arrests of women trafficking children to these neighboring big cities. And we found out that the network of women child trafficking in Akwa Ibom State, of perpetrators of child trafficking in Akwa Ibom State is very, very huge and very well organized. But the police have dismantled these circuits and these networks, and I think they are doing a good job. But the issue of child trafficking is still going.
Felix?
Yes, yes, please.
We have to stop now because it's 12 o'clock. But you've raised two important issues that haven't been raised so much before. One is piracy. And you'll be amused to know that I was at a 2-day meeting last week on piracy, and people said, oh, Akwa Ibom doesn't have the problem with piracy. And I said, yes, it does, because all your coastal areas. And then you also raised the issue of a third ethnic nationality, that is the Oran, which is a very delicate issue in Akwa Ibom State. Many of us, when we think of Akwa Ibom, we think we know the ethnicities. But I think this is also reflective of the fact that there's a huge diversity of ethnicity across the Niger Delta. Some groups are dominant, some groups tend to fall into the background, but if we don't address their issues, we're going to have problems for the entire area. So these are the 6 state studies. You see that each state there are commonalities, such as kidnapping, oil bunkering, piracy, etc. But in reality, each state has its own unique problems that must be addressed. Do we have any questions for the speakers? They're not showing up on my. Do we have any questions for the speakers? Jimmy, has anything shown up on yours?
Ma, I didn't get that.
Do we have any questions for the speakers? They're not showing up in my chat.
No, nobody has asked any question.
Tarila, would you like to make any final comments?
Okay. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, and all the distinguished scholars that have contributed to this debate. And clearly, we have seen the intersections of the different drivers of insecurity. But moving forward, we are also seeing that, especially in states like Bayelsa and Akwa Ibom, that policymakers at the highest level, in the case of Bayelsa, the governor, in Akwa Ibom, also the government in relation to teachers' recruitment, are taking action based on findings of this report. But we do not want this to end there. We want this report to influence advocacy at the highest level, and not only for the researchers alone or for AP's works, but also for other NGOs. I see that someone like David Odafia is here from PIND, Honorable John Oinfie is here, who is in Bayelsa State government. Several other people are here on this meeting. So we hope that some of the key issues, such as drug abuse among young people, human trafficking, communal violence, in street gangs in Port Harcourt, and all these kind of issues can be picked up, and specific programs designed by government to respond to these issues, to improve on security situation or how insecurity affects people in the Niger Delta. Without much ado, I will now say thank you very much, and I will hand over to Chief Judith Asuni.
Thank you, Tarila. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I would like to
Julie,
thank.
I think someone has a question.
Okay.
The person with the ID TechnoSpark 5, I've asked him to type his question.
I'll let him speak.
Okay,
Hello.
okay.
Hello,
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Hello, I have a question and a contribution.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Identify yourself.
Yeah, I'm an associate professor with the Bayes University here in Abuja. My name is Usman Mohammed, the head of international relations and diplomacy. Now, they have raised issues and quite very interesting, but all of them have not actually brought to bear 2 or 3 important things. Number one, legislation. by the National Assembly? How do we push for legislation by the National Assembly to take action? This is a democratic space, a regime. So we have to regulate human behavior through legislation, and we have to utilize the National Assembly effectively for laws that must work. That is one. Secondly, state and the federal government have to collaborate also and come together. Besides the issues of legislation by National Assembly, the bills that will be passed either by individuals or corporate bodies or NGOs, they need to work. The state and the federal government have to have policy options. We have to prefer policy options to the states, and then the federal government have to come in as well to curb all these issues. Lastly, is the effective role of NGOs that are there who have studied several of these issues without really coming together by these NGOs and civil society organizations, and without so much propaganda and awareness, public awareness of all these areas, I think we'll achieve less. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof. You've raised several salient points. We have given copies of our books to the members of the National Assembly, and we hope that next week we'll be doing presentations to them of not only the books, but also we've developed a series of policy briefs. As we know that legislators, people in government don't usually have time to read a 400 and something page book. So we do have the policy briefs, and those are available on our website. So like I said, we'll be doing that very soon. Please do check our website, aapw.org. And
okay.
I'm sorry, can you raise the second issue again?
But the states and local government? Hello?
Yeah. The states, yes.
The states and local government have to come. I mean, the states and federal government have to come together. How do we, on our own, the academics and also the NGOs and civil society organizations, prefer policy options and solutions for the state? They are just to take it. We are not to wait for them. We are to prefer solutions, policy options that they will collaborate. The state and the local government have to collaborate. That is the issue.
You're absolutely correct. And that's why after the presentation of our reports at the town hall meetings, we formed policy advocacy committees to take these messages off to the different levels of the states. And for example, Akwa Ibom State was very effective. They went out to the 3 senatorial zones, as did Cross River, presented these reports there. I see that Rear Admiral Nicholas Akwa is on, he has his hand up to make a comment. Akwa is the chairman of the River State Policy Advocacy Committee, and they have visited a number of senior security officers, etc. in the state. So Timmy, please, can you unmute Rear Admiral Bakpo so that he can make his contribution? Thank you.
Okay, I'm doing that now.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
My name is Stephen. Okay, I'm concerned.
Hello.
Mr. Bakpo, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And good afternoon to everybody. I am Rear Admiral Nicholas John Bakpo, the Chairman, River State Policy and Advocacy Committee. First and foremost, I want to thank all the presenters for what they have done. They've given us a very good guideline and opened our eyes for this. But one issue remains that there are many recommendations which are being followed up. What remains now is the strategies for implementation. I take one as an example, the case of Akwa Ibom State, where they were able to get the governor to introduce the concept of not recruiting cultists into the school as teachers. Now, how do we actually profile those who apply to be sure they are not cultists? Those are the areas we have to map out some strategies to make sure the implementation is flawless. Otherwise, the policy will be there and then the directives will be there, but we will still be recruiting cultists without being able to identify them. Some of those strategies should be like introducing professionals like psychologists and others into the recruitment process so that they can actually profile these people before they come in. In all the cases, if we work out appropriate strategies for implementation, then the advocacy can actually have its ground. Thank you very much.
Well done, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yes,
Yes,
yes, Dr. Judy, someone has a question.
Okay.
Dr. Akwa. Dr. Emmanuel Akwa.
Okay, we can hear you, sir.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. As a contribution to what Ria Mira just said now, I want us to be a bit careful about completely excluding culty or bad people generally from recruitment. Not being engaged, not being employed gives more room for bad people to continue to perpetrate trouble. I agree with the concept of profiling and monitoring, cultists and bad people in the system. But I know that the moment they remain idle, they say they are on their own and they continue to perpetrate trouble for the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Akpanabo. Dr. Akpanabo, by the way, represents ANDEF in Akwa Ibom State. So we don't want them putting in a negative influence on the students, but we don't want cult members to be jobless at home because they could cause more trouble. So what's a happy medium here? How do we manage their recruitment and in their involvement with young people? Does anyone have ideas?
Hello?
Yes.
We can hear you, sir.
Yeah, Usman. Yeah, Usman here. I think that rehabilitation, much more rehabilitation, and also legislation through NDLEA have to come in seriously to stop the supply line, which is very, very important. All these supply lines of drugs and that do not make our youth to think very well need to be cut off. That's one. Secondly, advocacy, massive advocacy in the radio, in the mass media, in the social media, and other mass media outlets, churning out the negative side of cultism and drug abuse need to be intensified in those areas. Thirdly, there have to be some empathy towards the families that lose all these youths to cultism. We have to look at them as victims, not as ground where cultists have been reared. We have to look at them and bring their families into the picture where they can make serious contribution in rehabilitating and bringing back those cultists back to society to think well. I think that it has to be all comprehensive. And also, lastly, education as an agent of socialization. We have to target the schools. Educational institutions are agents of socialization in the society, besides the family and also the church or the mosque. Those are areas where we can do a lot of work. And then religious leaders, and also elders. It has to be all comprehensive, a very intensive work, a very sociological and psychological work need to be done to psyche them up, to make them think well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. You've come up with some very specific suggestions.
Can I say something?
Oh, you want to say something?
Yes. Much as we are trying to find solutions to problems that confront us, we should also be mindful of the kind of solutions we will be preferring. For instance, we have one of the core issues we found in Bayelsa State to be the kind of motivation that youths now have to join gangs, cult groups, and go into militancy as the kind of reward that people that have led that kind of lifestyles get from government. Now, for instance, you look at the Niger Delta, who are the ones that the government has recognized and is paying stipends? They are militants, people that carried arms against the state. They are militants who destroyed our environment, who partly contributed to the destruction of the environment. We are not saying that militants are all bad. We also need them. They are our brothers. They have also played their own roles in the environment. However, once a system begins to reward those that have deviated from the norms and values of society, and the ones that are peaceful are neglected, it sends a wrong message to other ones to also want to take to that kind of violent lifestyle. So the reward system is faulty, where people that have taken into violence are rewarded, and those that are peaceful, that have gone to school, would have no jobs and would not be recognized by the system. And so it will be sending the wrong message when we tend to give more attention to those that have perpetrated crimes and criminality against the state and against individuals. So we should focus more on rewarding the peaceful and law-abiding ones, so that would motivate other ones to also be on the side of law and order. Thank you.
Thank you, Topo. I'll use this opportunity to invite you to check our website again. We have a report on what the militants say. We interviewed 30 militant leaders who were involved with the amnesty program, leaders and followers. And this was put together then by Dr. Tarila. So the report is on our website, aapw.org, as well as a policy brief on what should happen with the members of the militant groups. So please have a check of those. I think you'll enjoy reading it. I was amused when King Tom, who of course was a militant leader in the past, says that we need good strategic communication. So it shows how the situation is changing in the Niger Delta. For the various glossy reports that we've had of the Niger Delta meetings, the last one was the end of January, when we had the kings, traditional rulers from the region, and security agents come together to talk about how they can work in synergy to try to reduce insecurity in the Niger Delta. And it also includes summaries of the various town hall meetings that we had over the course of presenting these reports. I think our time is almost up. We've done very well to extend past.
Dr. Judith, someone typed a question in the chat section.
Okay.
Yeah, he or she said, is insecurity really going to end, especially with the use of youths as mercenaries? Did you get that, Ma?
I didn't see it in the chat, but in the use of youth as mercenaries, I think particularly in the political process.
Yeah.
Edo State report made it very clear that youth are used to perpetuate electoral violence. And I've worked with these fellows for years, more than 20 years, working with armed groups in the Niger Delta. As long as we have politicians who sponsor the youth as mercenaries, it will continue. So I'm afraid we have to work with the politicians or crack down on them to stop the use of youth. I think I'm going to make my final remarks at this point and to thank the Adonis and Abby for organizing this webinar. They're our publishers, you see our book. We thank the European Union because they've given us support for almost 5 years now. We started in June of 2016, and they've been a very important part of keeping a dialogue going in the Niger Delta. Maybe we don't always have the answers, or we don't have the political power to implement them, but at least we can continue discussion of the issues. I would also like to thank my fellow editors, Tarila and Professor Celestine Bassi, for the hard work on the report. The researchers, the 12 researchers who did this report, I really enjoyed working with you. You're a bunch of bright young people. I think this shows that this is a new generation of Nigerians who are coming up, who are enthusiastic not only about doing academic research, but also about finding solutions to the problems of the Niger Delta. And of course, my colleague, Ambassador Okoye, who has been my right hand, my partner in crime, as you might say, for the last 5 years. I very much enjoy working with her. She's bright, she's articulate, and she's committed. So we hope that we will continue to work together going forward. I see a hand up from somebody called C. Are we going to take this one? Timmy, what do you think?
Yeah, we also have another question. So I think we should just take the two, the person with his hand up and then the question, and that will be all.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, can hear you, sir.
Yeah, can you? My name is Stephen Yama. Okay.
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, my name is Stephen Yama. I want to ask questions concerning the Akwa Ibom. Mr. Felix Oshoro, you made mention of Aaron and Ekorabasi. A stronghold of piracy in his research, he found out that there's a stronghold of piracy in there. I want to ask him, in course of his research, is he able to identify the perpetrators or their link? Does he have a linkage? Does the action have any linkage with the piracy and the cultism? And another question, another one is that of the Delta State. When she was making her presentation, there is a selling point that she never mentioned concerning the Yahoo boys. Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, yeah. In Delta State, where I've stayed for years, the boiling point of the youths when it comes to violence is traced to the Yahoo boys, because you find that we are a primary or laptop or a phone to go to space in Yahoo, and most of these Yahoo boys are traced to cultism. You get, I think years back we carried the research in the Vikings confraternity, the Black Axe, when they have this street cultism. And we find out that most of them are linked to Yahoo because it's like source of defense. Because they don't want anybody, according to them, let me use the terminology, they don't want anybody to come and chance them. In that process, they identify themselves with a particular cult group and they carry out the Yahoo business. More than, let me not exaggerate, more than 60% of the youths in Delta State are not working into this business. And we cannot we must identify them as one of the major sources of violence in Delta State. And of recent, the NSAS was traced to these Yahoo boys. You get the NSAS in Nigeria was traced to these Yahoo boys. Whenever we are carrying out research on violence or any crime in Delta State, we must identify them as one of our target points. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Her Highness Christy, would you like to make a comment? Christy.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, good afternoon. I think, thank you very much for bringing me on board this afternoon. My wonderful appreciation and congratulations goes to Mommy Judy for this wonderful opportunity. I just want to add to what the presenters have said. The program is commendable, and I would advise and ask Mommy Judy to factor into the program, bringing in especially women, the role of women in peace building, community women leaders. Community women leaders are custodians of children. They are custodians of women and girls. And women and girls have a critical role to play when it comes to peace building as custodians of children. And so if women at community levels, community leaders are trained to anchor these programs in their respective communities, so as to leverage on existing women structures to always sensitize the women, always talk to the women, I think it will go a long way. So women should not be relegated to background when it comes to peace building, especially at the community level. Thank you very much, Mom. Congratulations.
Thank you, Christy. Ironically, next week, Wednesday, I'll be doing a webinar with a women's group talking about women peace builders, and we certainly will invite you for that. For those who don't know her, Her Highness Christy Owezo is an activist in River State. She's an Agoni by Indian, married to an Aquari, so she's crossed the state, and she's very active in the civil society space. And she's an example of women, how women should be involved in peace building. Thank you, Christy. Are we
Thank
okay?
you,
Do we have anything else?
Yeah, we have one more question. I think we should take the last one and then we'll be done. Okay, so the question is, what are the activities of cultists that warrant its negativity?
Can you read
that?
No.
Okay, the person said, what are the activities of cultists that warrant its negativity?
That warrant its.
The person thinks cultists just need knowledge on managing disagreements and differences.
Would one of the researchers like to take that? You just had an explosion of violence in Benin City recently because of cultism. Would you like to answer that question?
Okay, thank you. And I think that question came from Dr. David Udefia. Yes, there are a number of activities of cultists that warrant their negativity. One is killing. For instance, in Edo State, hundreds of killings in 2020 were attributed to cultists. So that's bad enough. And apart from that, if you look at the report of Edo and other states, there is a linkage between cultism and several other violent crimes. So those are some of the activities of cultists that warrant their negativity: killing, involvement in armed robbery, involvement in internet fraud. These are some of the activities of cultists that warrant their negativity.
Thank you, Ira. We were planning a nonviolent election rally in 2006 when our office in Port Harcourt was attacked by some cultists. 2 people were killed, a number of people were injured. So the next day we went to Hotel Presidential, rented a room, and sat down to write a list of people who had been killed in cult violence. We came up with 350 names within half an hour. It filled the entire page of one of the national newspapers. And the death and destruction through cultism has been extremely intense. We know so many families who have lost cult members, and even people who've tried to withdraw themselves from cults can end up being killed, because it's like an addiction, or it's like, a society, you cannot leave it because then you take its secrets. So cultism is really a very, very major threat to the Niger Delta. And unless, well, there's a whole research on cultism, but let me say that it is a very major problem, and we must do something to address it. at the family level, the community level, state level, government, and civil society, and religious leaders have a role to play. Okay, are we really finished, Timmy, or we're continuing? Great. Thank you very much, everyone. I think it's been a very interesting discussion. I'm excited to see the interest in the book and the discussion of the issues of the region. I encourage you to get the book, read it, look for our various reports. They're all online on our website. And whatever you can do to press these issues in your own environment, please do. Because I've lived in the Niger Delta for many, many years. I consider myself an honorary Niger Delta. Some people call me Niger. I would like the region to be peaceful, and even more peaceful as these issues are addressed. Again, thank you everyone for participating, and thank you to Adonis and Abby for organizing this webinar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Judith Asuni. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. So on the screen, you can see our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Kindly do well to follow us on all our social media platforms with the names that you can see on your screen. You can also visit our website to buy this book, to publish with us. We offer publishing services also. Once again, thank you, Dr. Judy and Dr. Tarila. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to everyone. Do have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.